Welcome to the deep dive. We take a stack of information, find the core insights, and, well, try to make them stick.
And today, we're exploring something absolutely central to Buddhist practice.
That's right, the triple gem. You've probably heard the words the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, but what does taking refuge here really mean?
Mm-hmm. And maybe more importantly, how, according to this specific teaching we're looking at, does one actually realize it? Not just understand it intellectually.
Exactly. So this isn't just about, history or abstract ideas. This source text gets quite detailed.
It does. It focuses on venerating, yes, but really on realizing this core principle. So our mission today is to kind of unpack this teaching, see what it says about the path.
Okay, let's dive right in then. The source starts, well, right at the beginning with the traditional homage. Namo, Tassa, Bhagavato, Arahato, Samma, Sambuddhassa.
Which means homage to the Blessed One, the Worthy One, the fully self-enlightened one. Standard, but important.
And then it defines the subject straight away. Ichite Ratana-ttaya Buddho Dhammo Simkoti.
Meaning, this is the triple gem. The Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. And the text points out that Namo, that first word, signifies homage or veneration.
But what struck me right away is this emphasis on unity. The source uses the Pali. Nanahantampi avatuto anyamanyamay vyoga vakibuchamapanatato. Quite a mouthful.
It is. But it basically means even though they seem distinct in substance, they're actually unified in meaning because they are inseparable.
Unified. But they seem like three different things, don't they? You have a person, the Buddha, a teaching, the Dhamma, and then the community, the Sangha. How are they inseparable?
Well, the source anticipates that question. It clarifies with another verse. Buddho dhammasa bodheda dhammo sagana darito.
Okay.
Sahaka sabako buddhasa icheka buddhanivdanti. So the Buddha enlightens the Dhamma is upheld by the Sangha.
And the Sangha are the Buddha's disciples.
Exactly. And then it concludes they are ultimately unified with the Buddha. It's hinting at a much deeper interconnectedness right from the start.
Okay, interesting. That definitely sets the stage. So the triple gem, it's called Ratana-ttaya. You mentioned Ratana means gem. Trey is three.
Triple gem, yes.
So why gems? What's the significance of that analogy in this particular source?
The source explains it quite simply, actually. Gems are valuable because they bring, joy and satisfaction to whoever owns them. They make you feel rich.
And they have a kind of universal appeal, right? Everyone recognizes a gem's value.
Precisely. But then the source draws a really sharp contrast.
Between worldly gems and the triple gem.
Absolutely. It says the triple gem isn't just like worldly gems, it's vastly superior. It mentions worldly treasures, jewels, even the legendary 7 treasures of a Chakravartin king.
A universal monarch, yeah.
And it claims the triple gem makes all of that seem insignificant. Here's the really bold claim. Upon reaching the triple gem, one forgets all worldly treasures, even heavenly realms.
Forgetting even heavenly realms. Wow, that says a lot about the kind of ultimate value this source is placing on it.
It really does. It frames it as the supreme treasure.
So, if it's that valuable, how does the teaching say we should engage with it? It talks about different levels of homage, this Namo, veneration through body, speech, and mind.
It calls it personal veneration. Starting with bodily homage, the source gives really specific examples, like during the Buddha's lifetime.
How so?
Prostration, for instance, with 5 points touching the ground, knees, elbows, forehead, hands together.
The 5-limb prostration?
Right. And also just mindful posture when near the Buddha. Not too close, not too far, not upwind.
Upwind? Why not upwind?
So your scent wouldn't disturb him, presumably? Just general consideration? Not directly in front or behind either, showing respect through physical positioning.
Okay, that makes sense for when the Buddha was alive. What about after his passing? How does the source describe bodily homage then?
It focuses on showing respect at the different kinds of stupas or memorials. There are 4 types mentioned. Dhatu stupas with relics, Paroga stupas with items the Buddha used.
Dhamma stupas representing the teaching, and Udesika, the symbolic ones.
Exactly those 4. And the way to show respect includes things like lowering umbrellas, removing outer robes from the shoulder, taking off shoes, practical things.
Maintaining silence too, keeping the area clean.
Yes, sweeping, clearing debris, even repairing damage if you can. But the source stresses something crucial here.
What's that?
It has to be sincere respect, not just going through the motions. The inner attitude is key.
Right. The physical acts mean something because of the intention behind them. So that covers bodily homage. What about verbal homage?
This one's pretty straightforward in the source's explanation. It just means constantly praising the triple gem to others, speaking well of the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha.
Simple enough. And mental homage.
Also quite direct, constantly thinking of the triple gem, actively guiding the mind back to the triple gem, preventing it from just wandering off or getting totally absorbed in other things.
So consciously keeping the triple gem in mind. Okay, body, speech, mind, that covers the Namo. And we often chant Namo Tassa 3 times. Does the source explain the repetition?
It does give a specific reason. Reciting it 3 times is said to venerate the triple gem in the past, the present, and the future.
Ah, acknowledging its timelessness. Okay.
Exactly. It connects the act of homage to the enduring nature of the refuge.
Now, this is where the teaching seems to take a significant turn, doesn't it? Moving from this outward veneration towards, well, something much more internal. Realization.
Yes, a major shift. The source makes a very clear distinction between just understanding the triple gem from, say, scriptures or images theory, basically.
It's knowing about the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha.
Right, versus actually realizing it through practice, which it calls papiyati, and it uses that analogy of a tree.
The tree analogy, right. Tell us about that.
It says that understanding, theoretically, is like just touching the bark or the sapwood of the tree. You're on the surface.
You know it's a tree, but you haven't reached its core.
Exactly. True realization, payupati, according to this source, is reaching the core heartwood, the real substance, the essence.
Reaching the heartwood, the essence. So how does this teaching say you get to that core realization?
It says it requires working with something subtle. It introduces these concepts, the subtle formations of body, speech, and mind, kaya sankara, vaki sankara, and citta sankara in Pali.
Subtle formations. Okay, what are those, according to this text?
Kaya sankara is defined here as the breath, the subtle process sustaining the body.
The in and out breath.
Essentially, yes. Vaki sankara is the thinking, the planning, the internal chatter that happens before you actually speak.
Ah, the mental rehearsal, almost.
Kind of. And citta sankara is the mental activity itself, the conditioning or fabricating aspect of the mind. These subtle processes are usually just running constantly, often unnoticed.
Okay, so the path to the core, the heartwood, involves these subtle formations. Does it mean stopping them? Calming them?
Precisely. Calming them. This is central to the method described. The source quotes a Pali verse, Tesavu pasamo sukho. The calming of these formations is happiness. And the way to achieve this calming is described as making the mind stop.
Stop. Just stop.
It uses a specific phrase, stopping, stopping and stopping, an intentional cessation. And it says this happens by focusing the mind very precisely.
Where?
At the very center point of the human body, this profound stillness, where these subtle formations, breath, pre-speech thought, mental churning are calmed or cease. That is what the source calls santi, peace.
And it links this to anapana, breath meditation.
Yes, but interestingly, it interprets anapana in this context as the breath coming to a stop or becoming utterly still through this focused stopping of the mind at the center.
So stillness at the center calms everything. And this leads somewhere, like stages of practice.
It does. The source connects this stillness directly to stages that sound very much like satipatthana, the foundations of mindfulness.
How so?
When the subtle body, the kaya sankara, the breath, stops or becomes still, that relates to kaiṇapasa and contemplation of the body, specifically as cessation. When happiness arises from this stillness, which the source says it does, that's Vedananupassana, contemplation of feelings, feeling that peace and happiness.
And the mind observing this.
That's Cittanupassana, contemplation of the mind itself, focused, centered, contemplating this peaceful, happy state.
Body stopping, feeling happiness, mind watching. And when these 3 align, something happens.
Something very significant, according to this text. When these 3 align perfectly, body contemplation, feeling contemplation, mind contemplation, a luminous sphere appears.
The sphere of light.
Yes, and this is called Dhammanupassana Satipatthana, contemplation of Dhamma. The source calls this sphere the Dhamma gem sphere, or sometimes the first pass, Patamamok.
The Dhamma gem sphere. So this is the first glimpse of the real Dhamma gem.
It seems to be the entry point. And here's another one of those really striking claims from the source.
Sure, what?
It states that the entire Tripitaka, the whole collection of Buddhist scriptures, is contained right there at the very center of this luminous Dhamma sphere inside the body.
Wow. The entire canon inside this sphere, revealed through stillness. That's a very internal view of scripture.
It suggests that the essence of all teachings is found within through this practice.
So what happens after realizing this first Dhamma gem sphere? Is that it?
No, that's just the beginning of a deeper journey inward. The source describes progressing through nested spheres within that initial one.
Nested, like Russian dolls.
Kind of like that, yeah. By focusing the mind intensely at the very center of one sphere, it sort of dissolves or vanishes.
And reveals the next one inside.
Exactly. A progressively more subtle sphere appears. And these spheres correspond to key stages of the path. Sila, morality; samadhi, concentration; panya, wisdom;
Vimutti, liberation; and Tassa, knowledge and vision of liberation. So you're moving deeper through these fundamental qualities.
Precisely. Each sphere represents a deeper level of realization of these qualities, moving inward towards the core.
And this progression through spheres, does it relate to anything else? You mentioned subtle bodies earlier.
Oh, yes, exactly. This meditative journey through the nested spheres corresponds directly to attaining or realizing different, increasingly subtle bodies, or kaya.
What are these bodies?
The source lists them in sequence.
No.
The ordinary human body, manusakaya; then a divine body, Dhammakaya, perhaps a subtle energy body;
Okay.
then a fine material Brahma body, Rupa Brahmakaya; an immaterial Brahma body, or Rupa Brahmakaya. These correspond to higher states of meditative absorption, usually.
And finally?
Finally, the Dhamma body, the Dhammakaya. This is presented as the culmination of this inward journey through the spheres and bodies.
The Dhammakaya. That sounds crucial. What does the source say about the Dhammakaya? What's its nature?
This is where the source really defines the goal. It states that while those first four bodies, human, divine, Brahma bodies, are ultimately experienced as impermanent, unsatisfactory, anicca, dukkha.
Impermanent and suffering.
Right. The Dhammakaya, when realized, reveals true permanence and true happiness, nikka, sukha. It's described as the true self, or true essence, bendua, whereas the others are temporary, not self, mayachedua.
Permanence and happiness. A true self. That's a strong claim, especially in a Buddhist context, often emphasizing no self.
It is a distinct perspective presented in this text, yes, linking the Dhammakaya to permanence, happiness, and a sense of true being.
So how does this Dhammakaya relate back explicitly to the Triple Gem, the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha?
Very directly. According to this source, the Dhammakaya is the Buddha Ratana, the Buddha gem.
So realizing the Dhammakaya is realizing the Buddha gem within yourself.
That's exactly how this text presents it. This inner attainment is the Buddha.
Okay. Then what about the Dhamma Ratana, the Dhamma gem?
The source makes a distinction here. Remember the nested spheres? The Dhamma spheres associated with the first four mundane bodies, those are considered lokiya Dhamma, worldly Dhamma.
Mundane, okay.
But the Dhamma sphere that is realized alongside or within the Dhammakaya, specifically mentioning the level of a stream enterer, Sotapanna, at least that sphere, is Lokuttara Dhamma.
Supramundane Dhamma.
Ah, transcendent Dhamma.
Yes. And these supramundane Dhamma spheres, realized with the Dhammakaya, are the Dhamma gem.
So the Buddha gem is the Dhammakaya itself. The Dhamma gem is the supramundane sphere realized with it. That leaves the Sagaratana, the Saiga gem. How is that defined here?
The source gives a very specific, maybe even unusual definition for the Saiga gem in this context.
Which is it?
It comprises all realized Dhammakayas, except for the Dhammakaya of a fully enlightened Buddha, a Samma Sambuddha, and the Dhammakayas of private Buddhas, Pacceka Buddhas.
So all the other Dhammakayas?
Yes, all the Dhammakayas belonging to the disciples, Savaka, from stream enterers up to Arahants. Their collective Dhammakayas constitute the Saiga gem.
So the Saiga gem here isn't the outer community of monks and nuns primarily, but this inner collective of realized Dhammakayas. That's the interpretation given in this specific teaching, yes. Yeah. It's an internal realization of the Saiga refuge.
So, realizing the true Triple Gem Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, is, according to this source, an internal process tied completely to realizing the Dhammakaya and its associated supramundane Dhamma.
Correct. And the path to get there is this practice of stopping in stopping, this profound stillness cultivated at the center, leading through the spheres and the subtle bodies.
And it emphasizes this isn't the common way.
It explicitly says this path of stillness is the way of Buddhas and Arahants, implying it's, well, not the path taken by ordinary people who haven't developed this deep inner focus and stillness.
It also mentions something about 10 centers.
Yes, briefly. It mentions the concept of entering 10 centers SIP soon as being consistently involved in the process of birth, death, and also in reaching this triple gem realization. The source doesn't detail what these 10 centers are, but flags their importance for these transitions.
Another layer of subtlety there. But this really brings us full circle, doesn't it? Back to that initial point about unity.
It absolutely does. The source concludes by saying, look, while the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha might seem different, when you're looking from the outside, or before you've grasped this core principle.
Before realizing the Dhammakaya.
Exactly. Once the Dhammakaya is realized through this practice, then they are seen as fundamentally interconnected. One unified reality, dunongripen and diagantete, truly interconnected as one.
Just like those opening Pali verses suggested, distinct in substance, but unified in meaning.
Precisely. The practice reveals the underlying unity.
What an incredible journey this source maps out. From, the outward signs of respect, bowing, chanting.
Right. The reasons for chanting Namo Tassa 3 times, honoring past, present, future.
All the way to this incredibly intricate inner path. Reaching the heartwood, not just the bark.
Through calming the subtle formations, breath, thought, mind, using that technique of stopping and stopping at the very center.
Leading to the arising of the Dhammagem sphere, then navigating those nested spheres of Sala, Samadhi, Panya.
And realizing the subtle bodies, culminating in the Dhammakaya,
which this source identifies as the true Buddha gem.
with its associated supramundane sphere being the Dhamma gem.
And the collective Dhammakayas of the disciples forming the Saga gem.
And the core message seems to be that this isn't just philosophy. The source presents it as a tangible, achievable reality through this specific meditative practice.
A reality that leads to a kind of happiness and fulfillment that it claims makes all worldly things, even heavenly realms, seem pale in comparison.
That's the promise, yes.
Yeah.
A happiness born from realizing this inner triple gem.
It certainly makes you reconsider what taking refuge could mean, doesn't it? If, as the source powerfully claims, the triple gem is a real gem within, one that eclipses all external treasures, and if the path to uncovering that gem lies in cultivating this profound inner stillness right at the center of our own being, what does that suggest about where we should really be looking for lasting value, for true refuge in our lives?
That's the provocative question it leaves us with, isn't it? Where's true wealth really found?